For those who just joined, just waiting for a few more to join, and we'll get going in about 30 seconds. Looks like we've got people here. It's ready to go. Righty-ho. So my name is Philip Aldridge. I'm the host of this webinar today. I'm Executive Director at Hazens. So welcome today. Today's webinar is Counterfeit Respirators. Can you tell the difference? It will be presented by New Zealand Occupational Health Hygiene Society, and Association WorkSafe and Hazens. The webinar looks at providing information to businesses to help identify non-certified masks and help workers and businesses who are not being provided with right PPE. This follows on, you've probably seen at the WorkSafe safety alert, talking about non-compliant and improved respiratory protective equipment. So today's panelists are Mariska, Luca and Al, and so I'll pass across them shortly. Just in terms of the format today, so just do a bit of introduction, then we'll have Mariska doing a 25-minute presentation of thereabouts, and will be followed by a Q&A and a panel discussion. And also, we've got some of them coming in from Australia at the end, so we'll hear what's happening in Australia as well. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A, a button, so I encourage you to use that throughout the session, so answer your questions, or encourage you, we'll hopefully get through most of those questions today, so use the Q&A rather than the chat function. Today we are recording the presentation, and the presentation that Mariska provides will be sent out in the next couple of hours. So we'll go from here. So over to you, Mariska, and others to introduce themselves.
Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mariska Gerber. I'm an occupational hygienist working for Douglas Pharmaceuticals. I'm also a member of the NZOHS, and I'm currently the president-elect. So welcome. I do hope you enjoy the presentation and you take away a few pointers. Over to my great panel, which I couldn't have done this without. Thank you very much, Luca and Al, for agreeing to be on the panel with me.
Well, my name is Lucre. Hi to everybody. I am an occupational hygienist at the moment working for 3M, and I am also part of the NZOHS. I'm currently the treasurer for the society, and yeah, I hope you enjoy the webinar and found it interesting.
Hi everybody, my name's Al Threlfall. I'm an occupational hygienist. I'm also a technical specialist for WorkSafe New Zealand as part of the work-related health team there. Also a member of the New Zealand Occupational Hygiene Society. Thanks everyone.
Over to you, Mariska.
All good, I'll just share my screen. Okay. So that should now show up, am I right?
Yep.
All good. So as you can imagine, counterfeit respirators, well, definitely started off not just in New Zealand, but is all over the world at the moment. And today we're going to talk about whether you can tell the difference or not between a counterfeit respirator and something else. And just before we start, I would like to say that during this discussion, we don't consider surgical masks as part of a counterfeit respirator. We're only going to focus on the respirators. And that being said, that's the one that seals tightly on your face. So just keep that in mind when we talk about counterfeit respirators. A bit of an index. We're going to look at respiratory protection, just doing a definition of what that is, then looking at typical product markings, what you can expect to see on a non-counterfeit respirator. We're going to discuss the CE mark and also the China export mark, look at certificates and how you can verify certification of your respirators, look at some genuine and fake respirators, who can help, and also what you can do when you come across a counterfeit. And we'll also leave you with some useful resources not just from New Zealand, but also international resources. And at the end, we have some acknowledgements. I do have a disclaimer early on in the presentation, and that is that the examples we used in this presentation does not represent or endorse any specific brand above another. So please bear that in mind when we go through the examples. So to start off, when we look at respiratory protection or respiratory protective equipment, we normally want a type of protective equipment that's going to protect the worker from breathing in your hazardous substances. And ideally, your respirator should then cover both your nose and your mouth, or in some cases, it can also cover the entire face or head. You get different types of respirators. Like we said, we have your half face mask that covers your nose and your mouth, and you get a full face mask that covers the whole face. So RPE ultimately needs to comply to a certain standard to give you that level of protection. But there's a few things that you need to keep in mind when you look at the standard that the respirator is manufactured against, and that's a few things like making sure that it's manufactured in an area where you know that that manufacturing site is not contaminated in any way. So it's not going to cause your respirator to be contaminated once it goes into its packaging and then being put on your nose and over your mouth. So ideally, you want to be sure that that you have sufficient and good manufacturing facilities where these respirators are manufactured. And also, there's a few other bits and pieces. You want to make sure that you get it manufactured from fabric and materials that's also not going to cause any harm to the wearer when they breathe in that chemical that the respirator is made of. Also, you may be more familiar with the terms like dust mask or a filtering face piece. So these are various terms that also get used for respiratory protection. But for the purpose of this presentation, we like to use the word respirator. So there's no confusion between something like a surgical mask and a respirator. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw a great increase in demand for respiratory protection. And that caused some restrictions at the moment, or is still currently causing some restrictions, and also resulted in a shortage in supply. So as the demand increased, other countries also had that same demand, which prevented us from importing our respirators that we normally get via international channels. So like it says there, the COVID-19 pandemic has restricted export of PPE from some countries, and those are the channels that we're currently using. So it's really making New Zealand supply limited. And overall, there's been an increase in the need for the usage of the N95 or equivalent type respirator. And the main reason for that is because it's known to protect workers from the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So both these increase in demand and the shortage of supply has resulted in an influx of potentially non-compliant respiratory protection into the New Zealand market, and as we've seen on the cover page, also into the other international markets. The non-compliant respirators obviously pose a health risk to anyone wearing them, because if it wasn't assessed by complying to a certain standard, you don't really know whether it's going to give you any protection at all. So it provides little, no, or unknown protection against the coronavirus, which is what a lot of these masks or respirators are used for, but also any other hazardous substance that's currently in the workplace. With the level 2, at this stage, a lot of workers are returning to work, and they need to protect themselves from other hazardous substances in the workplace. And having the risk of having a counterfeit respirator provided to these facilities do mean you can actually issue your workers with something that's not going to give them that level of protection that they need. So we know that you want to have you want to be on the lookout for for markings, etc. But the manufacturers are starting to make a statement of compliance with the ASNZ standard. So you want to make sure that they have that marking on the respirator, and you should ensure that such compliance is capable of being verified. It's very important that don't just assume because it has the marking on the respirator that it is it does what it says it does. I guess the counterfeit manufacturers gets clever in a way where they know what markings to put on these respirators so people feel a bit more secure. So always verify the markings on the respirators. Disposable respirators that meet or are compliant with the ASNZ standard 1716 shall be clearly marked with the manufacturer's name, trade name, or the mark, and the filter classification. So it should indicate whether it's a P1 or a P2. And then on WorkSafe's website, they also consider other international standards for these respirators. And those standards are normally the N95 respirator, and that's rated compliant by the US National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or also known as NIOSH. Another standard that they consider equivalent is the European FFP2 respirators, and that is if they are compliant under the EN 149. The Chinese KN95 respirators that are compliant under the GB 2626. The old standard was in 2006, but so a lot of respirators you'll see still have that compliant year, 2006, but there's been an update to the standard in 2019, so just something to be aware about. And then also, these are only applicable to the P2 equivalent. So when WorkSafe says they consider other equivalents, it's equivalent to the P2 classification that we have under the ASNZ 1716 standard. And these are all respirators that we see imported into New Zealand. So we get the NIOSH brands, we get the European FFP2 respirators, the KN95s we've seen on our shelves. So again, we need to make sure that we verify their compliance with the standards they say they comply to. So how does the typical marking look? If you pick up a respirator, would you pay attention to some of the detail on a respirator, or do you just wear whatever is available or provided to you? So for the Australia New Zealand market, or respirators made for Australia and New Zealand, we ideally want the manufacturer's name, or not ideally, as per the standard, we have to have the manufacturer's name on the respirator. We need to have the standard, so the ASNZ standard is represented. The classification is listed there, P2. We also have a size if it's applicable. So sometimes the standard can also be printed on the strap. So you see that with a lot of NIOSH approved respirators as well. So something that you can have a look at. Another standard would be the NIOSH 42 CFR Part 84, which is the approval for respiratory protective devices under the United States. And this particular respirator you'll see it being used extensively in the healthcare environment across the world. So again, you're looking for your manufacturer name or the logo. The word NIOSH should be on there. You want your approval number. So they normally have the TC approval number. The model number would be on the mask or on the respirator. Apologies if I keep on saying mask, it's just old habits. Manufacturer's lot number and the filtering face piece class. In this case, it's N95. So when we look at the EN model, a lot of similarities come through. So even though different standards, they all still require minimum type of markings on the respirators. So your EN 149, for example, would require again the manufacturer name, the product name or model number. Your EN 149, your standard listed, then your classification. So is it FFP1? So the FFP stands for filtering face piece. is the 1, FFP2, FFP3. And then also they will have what is called your NR or your R sign. Your NR is normally indicated that it's for a single shift use. And if it indicates an R sign, it means you can have it reusable. They also add an additional safety feature to their respirators, and that is the CE marking. So you may have seen your CE mark on various types of equipment or tools or electrical supplies that you purchase, and that's your European certification mark. And along with that also comes your approval number. On to the Chinese KN95. In this case, it's a KN90 used, but under the GB 2626 standard, as I mentioned earlier, which is now replaced by the 2009 version. You want to make sure that it contains the following criteria on these masks. So you want a manufacturer name, product name or model number, the standard that it's referencing. So in this case, the 2006 version is still allowed. You also want the classification criteria. Is it a KN90, a KN95, or a KN100? Because these are all equivalent to each other if you compare your P1, P2, your FFP1, FFP2, and then KN90, KN95. They're not exactly similar, but they do have the same level, or they can provide you with that level of protection pending the studies that's been done under that standard. So a bit more on the CE mark, because I think this is something that we tend to look over. Once you see the CE mark, you feel confident that it has been through all the European safety classifications and criteria. But again, there's some counterfeit marks out there that we also want to be on the lookout for. So if you look at the CE mark, it has a specific design where you have a half-cut circle, and the other end of the half-cut circle to form the E of the European certification brand starts at the end of the completion of the first circle. Also, something else to be on the lookout for is your middle line of the E does not extend all the way to the center of the circle, so it's always slightly shorter than that middle line. So every legitimate CE marked product is considered to be of better quality. So like I said, it's giving you that extra safety precaution that it has been assessed and it has undergone certain testing and requirements. But then you also get something that's called the Chinese export. And that mark can also be seen on some products produced in and exported from China. Now, the mark is very similar to the European certification mark, but it's not the same mark. So as a result, you can think that your product is CE marked and safe to use, but in actual fact, the Chinese export, or what they claim to be a CE mark, is not the official European mark and is considered fake. So such products wouldn't have gone through all the necessary risk assessments and safety evaluations. And we will look at the exact schematics in the next slide, but maybe you can already see some variation between the original European CE mark and the China export mark. So even though the Chinese export mark resembles the official European CE mark, it doesn't respect its dimensions or proportions. And there's two small differences. And the one is that the letters are formed identically, but the spacing between them are, the spacing is different. So the correct CE mark, like we said, start in the middle of, or the correct CE mark has the E starting on the end profile of that circle, whereas the E of the China export mark starts almost in the middle of that circle. So that's something that can easily be picked up, and that's the spacing between the two marks.
Mariska, there's a question just popped
Yes.
in around CE stuff. I don't know if,
yeah.
So if the masks only have limited information on the mask, i.e. CE, FFP2, But whatever information is on the packet, is that fake?
Yes, I would think, I would definitely say that it is fake or counterfeit. You want all your markings on the mask as per the standard requirement. So if the packet is claiming to have certain or meet certain standards, it should be reflected on the mask because the markings should be on the mask.
Thanks.
All good. If we look at the certificates, counterfeit manufacturers are quickly becoming aware of the markings, like I said earlier, and they know what needs to be on these respirators. So don't just assume because it has all the markings, it must be an original. And prior to procurement, it would definitely be best to request the compliance certificates, or in some cases, even just a verification documentation or a letter that proves that the respirator meets the standard it claims. So you definitely want to be verifying your compliance certificates. And what's expected of you as the consumer is not to know exactly what to look out for, or not to know what counterfeit and non-counterfeit is, but at least to start that process and to instigate the verification. And if you need to use other tools, to know when to use those tools and when to search for more information. So you can verify a compliance certificate by inspecting the content on the certificate, of course. If anything looks suspicious, you can follow it up, but I would almost say indefinitely follow it up. So search via the Certifier online tools. I'll show you a few screenshots of different online searches that you can just punch in your certificate number, or you can contact the certifiers in certain scenarios. So a lot of certifiers and issuing bodies are aware of these counterfeit problems, so they really help as much as they can. Then important part is to communicate. So I always say, don't just assume someone upstream of your logistics or supply will be looking at something, or someone downstream will be looking at that. Always communicate with your distributor, with your person doing the purchasing. So don't assume that somebody else have done the verification and you can just implement it and it will be all good to go. So be alert, and especially in this time, don't let the shortage of stock influence your judgment. Don't be in such a high demand for a respirator that you overlook certain aspects, or you really want to believe that this respirator is the genuine respirator, and you short on stock, so now you're just rushing to get it on your shelves and available to your operators to use. So when you do examinations of your certificates, the BSI have a really good way of going about it. So they also say that prior to purchasing any form of safety equipment, to issue or at least that it appear to be issued by the BSI, to verify such a certification. And there's two ways that they provide you. First of all, there's a link in the PDF certificate, and they also promote requesting the PDF document of that certificate. So when you purchase your respirators, you can always ask for the digital copy in PDF, and then you can find a link at the bottom of the certificate which you can click on, and that should take you to a page to verify whether the certificate is valid. If you can't get that link, you can always look it up on their website, what is called VeriEye directory, and it's as simple as typing in the company name or certificate number. Now, having looked at a few certificates, a lot of them come without a company name, which should immediately put your alarm bells on. But also making sure that that you verify your company name or your certificate number. And should you not be able to follow any one of these paths, you can always email them directly. Like I said, they're very keen to help, especially in this time. Another body that you can use to verify certification, and I need to add that this is only if that respirator is indicated that it's been certified by the specific body. So if it has a Sci Global certificate, then you can verify it going to Sci Global. So it's depending on who the certification body is. But this is just as simple. You go to their website, you either put in the license number or the company name, and you hit the search button. If you are struggling with this and you don't get the company name or the license number, flick them an email. They already have pre-populated lists of companies that they know are counterfeiting their certificates. So they may, even without doing a search, tell you that that's a counterfeit. Now, a bit more on the NIOSH approved respirators. They also have specific signs that they want you to be on the lookout for. So again, they said no markings at all on the filtering facepiece respirator is an immediate indication of it being counterfeit. So that's just reiterating the answer back to Philip. No approval number on the filtering facepiece or the headband. So NIOSH definitely have both on the respirator and the headband. No NIOSH markings, NIOSH spelled incorrectly. And that's probably such an easy pickup because you see a lot of counterfeit respirators and they couldn't even be bothered just to double check that their spelling was correct. Then also the presence of decorative fabric or other decorative add-ons like sequins, that is definitely not a respirator designed to a specific standard. Claims for the approval of children. So NIOSH does not approve any type of respirator to protect children. And then again, filtering facepiece respirators, which has ear loops instead of the headband. So NIOSH doesn't approve any filtering facepiece with ear loops. There's a lot of information on the NIOSH website as well. If you do procure a NIOSH brand or a NIOSH approved respirator, you can go to their website and they actually have a list and a lot of photos, which I didn't want to share because it's going to make the presentation too long, but a lot of photos of counterfeit respirators that they've come across that actually uses the NIOSH mark. So please investigate further if you are procuring a NIOSH approved respirator. So just a few fake products that we've seen on the market so far. Is definitely the heaps of the KN95 respirators. So what we've discussed last night is, and Luca and I both discussed this, that we haven't come across any counterfeit respirator that claims to be ASNZ approved, and it may be because they don't really have such a large market. If they do counterfeit something, they want to hit a large market. So claiming to be KN95 approved is a much larger market. So hence people will probably spend more time counterfeiting something for a larger market. But if you know about any ASNZ claimed respirators, that would be quite interesting to know about as well. So please pass that information back. So for this example, you can see there's no standard number on the respirator. There's no manufacturer name, logo, or model number. No markings on the packaging even. It may be on the outer box, so you may buy it in a box of 20, but that doesn't tell you anything. You need to have it on the respirator itself. There's no EU CE mark or no notified body number. The same in this case. It's a very unusual design. No notifying body number. Manufacturer name, logo, model number, none of that. Also not indicating the N or the NR for single use or for reusable purposes. So these are just another European standard or claim to be in compliance with the European standard and the Chinese standard, the GB standard. So nothing on the respirator itself around the notified body number, the N marking, the NR marking, and yeah, simple enough. They claim ISO 9001, but that's not really relevant to any respiratory protection certification. We'll look at another example on the next slide where they claim FDA approved, which is also not really relevant. So
Mariska, you probably got 2 or 3 minutes left.
Oh, all good. So FDA,
2 or 3 minutes left.
Thank you very much, Philip. So again, a lot of companies claim to be FDA approved, whereas the FDA clearly state on their website that they don't offer any certification to demonstrate that the manufacturer is in compliance with FDA requirements. So don't, just because the package says FDA approved, especially for the food and the pharma industries, that's a typical trademark that we like to see on our products. It's nothing to do with respiratory protection, so please don't get caught in that trap. So who can help? Obviously, if you don't feel comfortable claiming or making that assessment yourself, you can always seek advice from an occupational hygienist by visiting our website, the NZOHS website, in that link provided, or you can, in our website, you will also see we've created a COVID-19 helpline, which will help just filter out normal requests from COVID-19 related requests, or ultimately you can visit the HAZANS register and you can find a HAZANS approved occupational hygienist online. So what should you do if you come across counterfeit? So if you've now done your assessment, you are absolutely sure that the certificate is fake and you've done your due diligence, you can report it, and we strongly encourage people to report this so that we can get the news out there and we can help others who hasn't done such a diligent process of verifying the counterfeit respirators. So you can report it to WorkSafe, where you can report non-compliant PPE. That link will be provided in the PowerPoint afterwards, or you can report it to the Commerce Commission, where you can just easily go in and you can make a complaint about someone claiming that they manufacture something to a certain standard, which is not the case. And that's our useful resources, like that I told you about in the beginning. So really important information from WorkSafe provided on the advice for businesses regarding respiratory protective equipment. Also the safety alert that Philip mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, as well as a lot of other international links that you can go and read up on. And at the bottom is the NIOSH link with all the good examples and photos that I talked about as well. And yeah, so acknowledgement definitely to the British Occupational Hygiene Society, who supplied us with some of the examples they used, and then to WorkSafe, who converted some of it into the Australian, New Zealand compliant respirators. But yes, thank you to the BOHS and WorkSafe for the collaborative approach in generating awareness, because ultimately we just want to protect our workers from being issued with a counterfeit respirator. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Great, thanks for that. So if you can unshare your screen now.
Yeah.
And there are panelists, put your videos on, put your mics on as well. So we have a few questions. So thank you for that, Mariska. It was very informative. It's coming in. One question here is from Wendy. Hi, Wendy. Thanks for the presentation, Mariska. I definitely have masks that have been sold to me as P2 equivalents. Can these masks be used for P1 use?
I'm happy for one of the panelists to step in. Lucra, Al?
I'll step in on this. So basically when you're talking about P1 and P2, the difference in the level of protection that they're giving isn't very much. So if what we're seeing from the NIOSH testing in the United States, when they are testing some of these masks that are being produced, is they're not even performing to that P1 level. So if you have no confidence over what you're actually getting, then you can't turn around and say that that's actually providing the protection I'm expecting. So I would say in that case, you wouldn't want to just consider it as a P1.
So a P1, I will add that a P1 has to comply with a minimum filter efficiency. So yes, you are assuming that it will comply with that, but the assumption is not based on really data. So it's kind of, you can say that it will comply with a P1. So you shouldn't use it as a P1 because you don't know.
And I can just add to that, where you're also not sure about the conditions it was manufactured in, or whether it complies to the overall standard, whether the straps on
Right.
the mask will be sufficient for a P1 even. So does it meet that required level of testing? Any other questions?
Do we go to that first one there?
Right.
What responsibility does the NZ importer have in regard to authentication? I'll speak briefly to that. Is that importers, the people bring things, all have duties under both the Health and Safety at Work Act and also the Fair Trading Act. So if you are an importer, you should be familiar with those and making sure that you're bringing in. So as Mariska talked about before with Commerce Commission, they will look at things like misleading claims or false representation. So as an importer, you want to make sure that the products that you are bringing in are legitimate and are doing what they say they do. Otherwise, you're not meeting the Fair Trading Act.
I think I have another question there, Al, if you want to answer on that one.
About the visiting PPE suppliers, WorkSafe has definitely been engaging with PPE suppliers over the last couple of weeks. We've spoken to a number of PPE suppliers and are working with them. WorkSafe work off a 3E process of engagement, education, and then enforcement. And we've seen this as part of our education, going out and educating PPE suppliers about these issues and addressing the concerns that are out there in the market. So, yeah, a number of it, we go out and talk to the people that we know about. But if you have concerns about a PPE supply, then please feel free to let us know and we can follow that up.
I think that answers the second question as well, where you can report dealers on TradeMe for by the same channels as we discussed.
Yep. I would actually say on TradeMe as well, if you have concerns over a TradeMe thing, also there is a report the ad bit down there, and that puts it through TradeMe's compliance process to make sure that product's actually correct as well.
You wanted to add something, Luca?
Oh no, I just was going to the next one about the pictorial evidence. So maybe we can mention that the society is producing a poster. Do you want to mention that, Mariska? That will
that will be a good time to share that. So after this presentation, you will receive a link to where you can find the PowerPoint on our website, and we are also putting together a A3 size poster if you want to take that off our website and just print it out and stick it on your wall. That will also be available after the webinar.
The next one about efficiency, can the mask be put to a fit testing? That is a good test to.
So my it's unstable, so my video off.
Cool. So fit testing is just, it's one of the tests, and it will assist about the how well a respirator fit a particular person. It will not tell you, it's not an efficiency for the filter part of it. It can give you some information, but at the end of the day, you need to know that the respirator has been made to a standard and has been made. The other part that was very important that Mariska mentioned was about the conditions that the respirator was made. So it needs to have the right materials that is not going to be affecting the skin of the person, and it has to be, tested against the efficiencies of the P2 or N95 or FFP2 KN95. So it has to be tested in regards to the efficiency of the filter as such.
Maybe, Luca, while you're talking on that, there's a few bits and pieces that you can also just add, in the sense of when you receive a respirator and you open the package, you can detect things like a really frank odor or smell, something that doesn't seem right. So in comparison to when you buy your normal respirators, you shouldn't be getting that that funny smell or funny taste. And also, like Lucra said, having that that respirator on your skin, so you definitely want to be sure that it's not made of a material that's going to cause skin irritation or yeah, cause any staining or any skin rashes.
Yeah, I guess that, you know, if you're able to get a sample of the product prior to purchasing, so they are visually some, you know, if they had all the marking, and but there are some, what Mariska says, one is the sense of a smell, but also visually, you know, the respirator should be made well, and the strap should be, you know, attached and secure, because the straps will be a key part of the functioning of the respirator to keep the respirator in position when the worker is wearing it. So how well attached the strap is to the respirator. So you could do some tested yourself. If it has a valve, you know, the valve should be as well, not a little bit crooked or in a position that looks a little bit funny. So, you know, the look as well sometimes can give you some idea. The nose clip as well, you know, sometimes some of them are a little bit detached, and that is another indication that probably is not being done properly.
Yeah, because to meet the standard or to comply to a standard, you need to make sure that your respirator doesn't have any sharp edges. It should be easily mounted on the nose and the mouth, and it shouldn't cause any harm to the wearer. So again, a nose clip that's slightly detached can cause damage. So that's definitely not a good sign. If just going through Jared's question, if they fail fit testing at a large rate, like greater than 50% failure rate, then this would mean they are not fit for purpose. Would this warrant a product recall by suppliers? Lucra?
I wouldn't say that, because, you know, fit test is more about matching a model of and a design of a respirator to a face of a person. So it doesn't mean, you know, if it doesn't fit our New Zealand population, and maybe, you know, it still could have been made to the standard, not to our standard, because our standard has a kind of, one of the tests relates to how well fit to a variety of people, but some of the other standards, they don't have that test. So it could be that still they comply with those other standards, but it could be that the design is not the best design for the face characteristics that we've got in New Zealand. And that is what the fit test will really tell you. So it's just more matching the model or the design to the face characteristics. I don't know, Al, if you've got anything else to add on that.
No, Luca, that's pretty much right. At the end of the day, you may have a workforce that doesn't fit that particular respirator model. In my experience of fit testing people over the years, there are just some faces you can't fit test, some ethnicities that have more difficult fitting into traditional styles of respirators. So you do need to have a look at that. That's an overall thing, but I would give that feedback back to the manufacturer or the supplier, because they welcome that, and if they get enough of that and they can detect a problem, it may even be a problem in manufacture, that there was a fault with the line that day, so the batch may be faulty as well. So it's always good to talk to your suppliers and your manufacturers about issues like that as well.
I see one more question that I don't think we've answered, Lucra, and maybe you will be a good person to answer this one. Is it not correct that a product could have a CE mark even if it doesn't meet the EN 149 standard? E.g., a surgical mask could still have a CE mark.
I'll jump on that, Mariska.
Yep,
the CE mark is used for anything that's on any product that's for sale in the European market. So it can even apply to clothing or, you know, various other things. It just doesn't apply to PPE. So CE mark could be used on anything and everything. And one of the things we're seeing on the CE certificates that are coming along with a lot of these respirators is the person that registered it can actually put in the information they want. So that's just another thing to be aware of, that sometimes they might provide you with a certificate saying it's been CE registered, but that has no value in turning around telling you whether it's been assessed as a respirator.
Yeah, so to answer in short, a surgical mask can have a CE rating, but won't comply with the EN standard. Then another question, where KN95 respirators without the correct markings is the only product we are able to obtain, what should we do? So I can answer on that, and that's going back to your risk assessment approach and what form of controls do you have in place and what can you put in place. If you can't procure a disposable respirator, maybe an alternative option is to look at something that's reusable. So from my understanding, the reusable respirators and their matching filters are still available in the marketplace. So that's an option to substitute your normally used disposable respirator with another type of respirator. If you don't get that particular respirator, you can always up version your level of control instead of just taking the counterfeit because you couldn't find anything else. And saying that it still needs to go through the right fit testing procedures. Is that what you wanted to add, Lucra?
Yeah, and I think as well is coming back a little bit to what you had in one of the slides is about, because we are in this situation with the current, pandemic, we shouldn't at all be considering lowering our standard of what we provide to our workers for protection. So if that is the only thing you can obtain at the moment is what you said, Mariska, you go back to what other options are and perhaps go one step back more and look at your hierarchy of controls and trying to apply other controls that you don't need to use a respirator for. And I always think that, if you've got a production facility and you have a piece of a critical equipment and you need to replace and you can't find that equipment, you will not replace with something which is the lowest standard. Where a respirator is protecting workers and it's a critical part of an equipment. So you need to, if you need to replace what you normally use, you need to find something that is as good or better than the one you were using.
I just want to add, Luca, that with the COVID-19, we've seen New Zealanders come up with fantastic engineering controls all across the country for the prevention of COVID-19. And it'd be great to see some of that effort be put into other engineering controls for other exposure hazards that we have out there. So, encouraging the Kiwi mentality of trying to improvise and see if we can put in some better controls while we're at it.
Okay, perhaps just take a little break there for a second and time for more Q&A, but what I'll try and do now is get Kate on the call, Kate Cole from Australia, who has who did some articles in Australia, and you might have seen some City Morning Herald. So hopefully Kate is here. Here she is. Coming on now.
Hi guys.
Hey Kate.
Hi.
Hi.
Kate.
Thanks for joining us, Kate. We look forward to your opinion on what Australia does at this point in time.
Okay, so you just cut out when you were introducing what you want me to say. So, Phil?
About what, 2 or 3 minutes about what's happened in Australia, what you found and what you've seen and across both the health and safety and medical professions.
Okay, sure. So I think our experience in Australia is not dissimilar to the experience that you have in New Zealand, and in fact has been found across, the US, the UK and Canada, for example. We've seen a lot of suppliers that in good faith have procured equipment and then on-sold it. And have tried to do that level of due diligence, so have asked for certificates and evidence per se, and they've been given certificates, but upon interrogation of those certificates have found to actually not be a true certification of the product. So the most common examples that we find in Australia of equipment that's being sold is where a supplier is using a TGA certificate or an FDA approval certificate. And as we know, neither of those bodies undertake certification for RPE, as you have stated in your webinar, which is true. And so they're using those certificates as evidence, and unfortunately that's not enough. we've also seen test certificates from laboratories that are not accredited for the scope of testing to EN 149, the European standard, or GB 2626, which is the Chinese standard. And I will reiterate what you said previously, which is around, we rarely see counterfeit P2 products. But the supply of P2 products in Australia, probably the same in New Zealand, is quite restricted as well. So that's a very broad summary. I think our experience is very similar. The latest update is obviously that our MP Greg Hunt has announced a national probe into the use of respiratory protection in Australia in hospitals, which is a fantastic thing that's being done. And the TGA announced, I think it was yesterday, that they were going to do that post-market review of respiratory protection that's listed on the TGA website. And we saw a number of companies immediately withdraw their products from the ARTG upon that announcement. So that's not suggesting, that doesn't demonstrate that those products weren't compliant, but it's not a great sign either. So that's the latest.
Great.
Thank you very much.
That's perfect. Thank you.
I would like to encourage our attendees to also go and watch Kate's video that she posted online about how she just rips off the straps of the KN95 that she just bought in comparison to actually putting some weight on other brands that she also had. So Kate, can you just share where that video link is available?
Yeah, I think the Sydney Morning Herald picked it up. So it's in the story that went out 2 days ago about the supply of counterfeit masks, unfortunately to some Australian hospitals, but it's also on my Twitter feed, which is what I did on the weekend. As you can tell, I don't have much of a life. But what I was trying to do was to find an easy way to demonstrate a very scientific test. So I appreciate that using a kilo bag of sugar to pick up a respirator is not a validated test method. However, when you do it against other products that are certified, you see very quickly that it fails in comparison to the others. And that's just trying to replicate that requirement in our Australian standard and the Chinese standard and the EN standard around the strength of the straps or head harness, I should say, of the respirator, which requires 10 newtons of force, which is 1 kilogram at sea level. And yes, I don't live at exactly sea level. So it's not overly scientific, but it's a good demonstration. A lot of the KN95s that we've seen, not all, but a lot, unfortunately just fail very quickly on the ear loops. And as has been raised before in this webinar, we really need a good seal of that mask for it to be working effectively. So without having good straps that will hold it to your face, it just will not work as designed.
Yeah. So again, I would like to reiterate the fact that before you go and buy 50,000 of these respirators from a supplier, please ask for a sample. And if they're really as good as they say, you will pick it up when you open your sample.
Great. Good point, Mariska. So let's go back to the questions. Thank you, Kate. That was very useful. Let's get to questions. Which ones haven't we covered off? How is WorkSafe visiting PPE suppliers and doing spot checks on the issue?
Yep. Oh, we've already done that one. So it's the four open questions.
Sorry.
The four open questions we've got left.
Okay.
Are there any sources, suppliers that we should be aware of that have been selling fake respirators? I can touch on that one, that there's various websites around on the internet that you can Google and they will show where people are finding fakes. There is a Facebook group as well that has that. And generally people are sharing a lot of information within resources, but there isn't any definite one site you can go and find it all.
Great.
I know there's also been this saying where if you buy a respirator from Bunnings or Mitre 10 or one of those companies, you're going to buy a fake, or you're most likely to buy a fake. Now, not that that's not true, but they also sell the genuine products. Like they sell products that's what they claim is true. So just again, do that assessment when you look at look at your respirator before you buy the whole box of them.
Great. What other questions have we got here?
Standard sizing for small and medium or large, Lucra?
Oh, the standard sizing for small, medium, or large. Oh, internationally standard. I don't know. I mean, there are some, you know, in our standard, for example, so I guess manufacturers, this is the only thing I can think of, but manufacturers, they try to manufacture products that will fit the most variety of sizes of people. So it is up to the manufacturer to design a product that will be, you know, useful in the workplace, and most sizes of faces can be wearing it effectively. That is checked through the fit testing. So I guess, like, if you ended up with a respirator that is too big and it will not fit many people, you know, you probably are not going to be good in business, I guess. But I don't know about the sizing as such. I don't know. I don't know if any of you know, Cage or Al.
Jane's just thrown in, Jane Whitelaw from Wollongong Uni has said that's around a fit test issue. And that's probably right. You're going to have to fit test your respirators anyway. And they will sort out the sizes. As you said, Luca, if you manufacture a whole heap of huge respirators that only fit like 5% of the population, you're not going to make much money.
So we can look at the next question. Yeah, you go, Philip.
You go, Mariska.
No, I was just about to read the next question to say, do you believe that we will need a large-scale education program on respirators, considering during the COVID-19 pandemic has seen a large increase in people using homemade masks, use of scarves, etc. as a mask? Which one of you want to answer? I can answer.
I'm kind of disappointed that Ashley Bloomfield didn't get up and demonstrate to the general public how to don and doff respirators. That was my personal wish, to see Ashley and Jacinda do it in their daily 1 o'clock updates. But I think for safety professionals, this may be a thing that we need to actually look at, because a lot of people are going to come back to the workplace with some bad habits or some bad knowledge. So it's up to workplaces out there to educate their employees, especially if they have to use these, so that we don't get some of the bad habits like we saw the Uber drivers just covering their mouths and all that stuff, that they actually are wearing the respiratory protection properly in the workplace.
And I guess I can add to that it really comes down to fit testing. So you shouldn't be issuing a respirator without making sure that that all your workers are properly fit tested, and that in itself, we've identified as a gap in New Zealand. So hence why Lucra has been working really hard at putting together a fit testing training scheme to also upskill people on what a proper fit testing regime should look like, and how frequently you need to do it, and what the tools are that you need to use. So I don't know if you quickly want to mention that, Lucra, and that will help the coming back to work and getting rid of that normally the homemade versions of protecting yourself.
I guess, you know, I will go as well one step back a little bit more, and when a workplace decides to use a respirator as a control, one of the things that has to be implemented, it is what we call, what is in the standard, is our standard 1715, is a respiratory protection program. Fit test is one part of it. Education and training is another important part, and that includes the donning and doffing, the reason why we need to use a respirator. So I think the education for workplaces, I guess, is about that PPE is the last step in the hierarchy of control. And when we choose to do that, it's because we can't do anything else. And that is the barrier between a person being exposed or not. And we have to do it so well And the respiratory protection program is one of the tools we have in our standard to make sure that we apply all the steps we need to do. So it's not only about choosing the right respirator that complies to all these standards we've been talking for the last hour. It is also about educating the person. It's about fit testing. So it's a little bit more bigger than what we currently think that it is, picking up a respirator from the shelf and giving it to a person, and this is it.
Yes, and Al, correct me if I'm wrong, but WorkSafe also assesses your respiratory protection program when they go and do assessments on sites. So they will ask for your RPE program and go through that.
So maybe an education on that, it probably will be quite good about what really means to choose a respirator as a control in the workplace and how it has to be done properly.
Yeah,
yep.
So
that's clear in the regulations, the general risk and workplace management regulations, that when you do put something, PPE in place, that you have certain duties to ensure, and one of those is ensuring that you have suitable fit and comfort and size. So that is something that every workplace that uses respiratory protection has to have in place.
So Philip, I notice we are out of time, but there's still one question that I think Lucra may want to answer. And it's just, can you touch a little on surgical masks? How do we know they are good quality, meet the standard, etc.? So Lucra, I think you'll be a good person to answer that one.
You know, at the beginning in the presentation, Mariska, you presented that we're not talking, you know, we don't consider surgical masks being a respiratory protection. They are designed for different purpose. They're totally different. And they do have different standards. So there is an Australia standard. We don't have in New Zealand, we don't have an Australian-New Zealand standard for surgical mask, but there is an Australia standard, and in New Zealand we follow that. And they are for single-use face mask for use in healthcare, I think it's called, the standard. And it does have the same like we discussed for this other standard for respiratory protection. This other standard for surgical masks has a series of requirements that the surgical mask has to meet. One of them is around fluid resistance, for example. So having a piece of cloth, you know, that has not been tested around fluid resistance, because that is one of the protections that it will be provided. It's about protecting the doctor or the nurse from blood that come back to them. So that test has to be done as part of that standard. Fluid resistance is not in our standard for respiratory protection. So it's different. It's two different type of equipment used in different situations for different purposes. I don't know if that answers.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that. Perhaps just, if you just want to each of you give us 10, 20, one or two things that people should know when they go back to work this afternoon.
Well, I will definitely start off by checking what you currently have in your plant or in your manufacturing facility. Perhaps do a quick, not a stock take, but just a roundabout of the respirators that may have been issued to your staff. I know in larger facilities, it's not easy to control. Sometimes they get procured from different departments. So making sure that you have one streamlined procurement department that checks and verifies that what you're actually putting out to your workers are not a counterfeit respirator.
Thanks for that.
So my one would be, if you are back to work and you find yourself in a situation that you can't purchase the respirators that you normally purchase, I challenge you to think about another way to do the job that you don't need to wear a respirator. So go up in the hierarchy of controls.
Great.
I'd say go back and have a chat about this with your workers. That's the important part, is, you know, get them involved. If they know that you're doing the right thing and you're getting the best that you can for them, that's building a lot of trust between yourselves and your workforce. Plus also, you can always have that session of sitting down and saying, what can we do better? How can we how can we work it that we don't need these respirators? How can we do those kind of things? So yeah, get in and make sure you have a chat to the guys on the front line, and make sure they're all around this as well.
Hey, Kevin, you're an honorary panelist.
No, and one more thing. I guess historically in the workplace, we would traditionally only see maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 different brands of RPE in a workplace. And that's, you know, due to great consultation, like with, you know, the men and women on, you know, that are doing the work, and you've come up with just a bunch of different types of respirators that one company uses. But now, because the supply is so restricted, we've seen organisations have to use, you know, 5 or 6 different types of respirators, which, you know, becomes a bit of a logistical nightmare. But what I would say is that it's incredibly important to review not just the markings, not just the certificates that come along with those markings, but making sure that the people that are wearing the type that they're wearing have been fit tested for that type. And that just presents another layer of work for us to do, but really important work, because we have seen respirators that have markings and they have certificates and they have been tested, but unfortunately are failing fit testing. So it's just really important that we go back and review that what people are wearing, they have been fit tested for, in addition to the product being legitimate.
Yeah. And we had one last discussion during the preparation for this, and that was on pricing. So don't assume because something's expensive, it must be legitimate. People are really taking the extra buck they can and thinking and knowing about the shortage, they tend to overcharge for something that's not compliant at all. So just because the brand is expensive doesn't mean it's not counterfeit.
For joining the panelists, thanks. Thanks, guys, for that. It was great to have you here. Great for everybody to join us. So, as I said, the presentation and the recording will be out shortly. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And have a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and a long weekend in New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.